Crossbows have been around for more than 2,000 years. It's not known whether they were developed in Asia and imported to Europe by early explorers or developed simultaneously on both continents. Like this circa 1600 German-made crossbow, most were cumbersome, heavy, and slow to cock and load. This particular crossbow was cocked with a lever mechanism, which attached to the metal pins protruding from each side of the stock. The crossbow was replaced as a military weapon by the English longbow because its shooter could draw and release up to 6 arrows, while the crossbow was recocked and loaded just once. When Europeans began to use black powder weapons, both forms of bow were replaced as a military weapon. Terms like prods and bolts are archaic when describing modern crossbows. Today's hunting crossbows use the same terminology as modern vertical archery equipment. Because the crossbow has a much shorter power stroke than the vertical bow, it must have much heavier limbs. The forward movement and strength of the limbs, combined with the length of the power stroke, determine the ballistic performance of an arrow. The vertical bow pushes the arrow more than twice the distance the crossbow does. Therefore, in order for the crossbow to reach the same arrow speeds, it must have more than twice the poundage of the vertical bow. Recurve limbs on a crossbow, in order to deliver similar arrow ballistic performance, must be longer and a little heavier than those on a compound crossbow. Compound limbs on a crossbow are available in both solid and split limb configuration. The riser on a crossbow, like the vertical compound bow, is where the limbs attach. Attached to the front of the riser is the cocking stirrup. When manually cocking the crossbow, a foot is placed in the stirrup up to the arch to prevent slippage. The cocker bends over the stock and pulls the string back, utilizing the strength of both hands, arms, legs, and lower back. The stock and barrel configuration varies little on modern crossbows. The tracked barrels are designed to permit the arrow to lay in perfect alignment with the string for consistent arrow grouping. Stock length is determined by the bow and power stroke of the crossbow. To match the faster speeds of compound vertical bows, crossbow manufacturers have lengthened stock and widened bows for a longer power stroke. The barrels on crossbows will be made of either aluminum or polymer. Above the latch mechanism that holds the bow cocked is the sight bridge. The safety is located on the side or at the direct rear of the sight bridge. On some crossbows, the safety is engaged automatically when the crossbow is cocked, and on others it must be engaged manually. When cocking the crossbow, the safety must be in the fire position, whether the safety is engaged automatically or manually. The arrow retention spring, which is at the front of the sight bridge, holds the arrow onto the track until the trigger releases the latch. Because the powerful limbs move such a short distance and stop quickly, the crossbow must weigh more than vertical bows to absorb shock, which would otherwise be transferred to the shooter. Every crossbow manufacturer includes an owner's manual in the box with each model they make. It is extremely important to read and understand this manual. Never attempt to put the crossbow together before reading the manual. If the dealer assembles the crossbow, never attempt to shoot it before reading the manual. An arrow is a shaft tipped with a broadhead or field point on one end and feathers or vanes on the other. The crossbow bolt was a short dart-like device utilized for indoors competitive crossbow shooting in Europe. The crossbow arrow is usually shorter than the vertical bow arrow, but is still an arrow. Each manufacturer stipulates in the owner's manual the minimum size arrow to be shot out of each of their crossbow models. Never attempt to shoot an arrow that is spined lighter or that is shorter than those recommended. Shooting shorter, lighter arrows can damage your crossbow and create a safety hazard to you and those around you. The vast majority of crossbow arrows are aluminum shafts with either a flat-capped or half-moon nock at the guidance end and threaded inserts at the other. Utilizing the shorter and lighter arrows of the crossbow, broadheads should fall into the 90 to 125 grain class. Larger heads put the balance point too far forward on the arrow, causing it to come out of the bow front-heavy. Smaller heads put the balance point too far back of the arrow, creating the opposite effect. Fixed blade broadheads, as a rule, should be 3-blade configuration for best performance. The most important connection in archery is where the fixed blade broadhead connects to the arrow. That connection becomes even more critical with the lighter, shorter crossbow arrow. Once the broadhead is screwed into the shaft of the arrow, it should be placed on a hard surface and spun. Place the tip of the broadhead on a solid surface. Circle the shaft with the thumb and index finger of one hand and spin the shaft with the other. Closely watch the collar of the insert where the broadhead is screwed into the arrow. If the broadhead spins true like a top, it will fly true. If there is a wobble, it must be corrected before it will fly true. Even with perfectly tuned fixed blade broadheads, the arrow will not strike the target in the exact same place as the field points. Once the crossbow is on target, the same weight and type broadheads that will be attached when hunting should be used for final zeroing in practice. After each shot and removal from the target, the broadhead should be spun again to ensure it still spins true. In recent years, manufacturers have introduced mechanical broadheads, which do not overpower arrow flight. These broadheads feature blades that are retracted until impact. The mechanical heads offer a more consistent arrow flight for shorter, lighter arrows launched from an overdraw-equipped vertical compound bow or a crossbow. The strike of the crossbow arrow on the target when switching to the mechanical broadhead from a field tip is much closer than with a fixed blade broadhead. Quality of performance on game with this type of broadhead has improved dramatically from earlier models. Each manufacturer offers quivers that attach to the crossbow to hold arrows. They can be detachable or permanently mounted. Hip quivers are available from most companies as well as archery dealers. Regardless of choice, it's important that the quiver completely covers the blades of broadheads when the arrow is inserted. Never carry broadhead fixed arrows on the crossbow or off with the cutting blades exposed. All crossbow manufacturers offer 2 types of cocking devices. The first reduces draw weight by 50%. It consists of a cord, wrist straps, and hooks, or a cocking sled that attaches to the string. The cord is placed over the stock or back of the sight bridge, and the hooks or cocking sled is attached to the crossbow string. The user then cocks the crossbow by standing up while pulling on the wrist straps. The cocking harness is very efficient, although it does require some manual dexterity and provides less physically capable individuals with the independence of cocking the crossbow themselves. The hand cranking devices are either permanently attached to the stock or can be easily attached and removed. Both systems offer a mechanical means of cocking even the heaviest draw weight crossbow by most individuals. When using the cocking harness or the hand crank cocking aid, follow the manufacturer's enclosed instructions to the letter. Never use either device to uncock the crossbow. When cocking by hand, users must be extremely careful of placing the string in the same latch position each time. Just as the vertical bow shooter must draw the bow to the same anchor point each time, the crossbow string must be drawn to the trigger latch in the exact same place each time for consistent arrow grouping. For the longer stocked crossbow models, even able-bodied people should consider a cocking aid to draw the string to the latch at the same place each time. Unlike a compound or other vertical bows, each crossbow manufacturer includes a sight system with every bow they package for sale. The standard included system is a peep rear sight with a blade and pin front sight. The sight should be installed following the owner's manual. The front pin should be adjusted so it's centered over the track where the arrow lays, about halfway to the top of the mounting blade. If the blade offers 2 slots, it doesn't matter which slot is utilized for the first pin. Second or third pins should be mounted in the other slot to separate them for quick pin identification of the yardage selected. All manufacturers offer accessory sight bridges for users that opt to utilize a telescope or red dot scope. Most of the crossbow manufacturers also offer scopes which have been specifically made for use with their product. Once the accessory sight bridge is installed, mount the scope or the red dot sight in the rings. Once the sights are installed on the crossbow, it's time to move to the range for zeroing in. The first shot should always be made at 10 yards or less. When utilizing the peep sight with pin, use the follow the arrow philosophy. If your arrow hits to the right of the bullseye, move the pin to the right. If it hits higher than the bullseye, move the pin up. Moving the strike of an arrow 1 inch at 20 yards requires 20 clicks. Scope adjustments or red dot adjustments are made in the same direction the strike of the arrow is to be moved. The owner's manual should be checked for pre-shooting preventive maintenance. Most manufacturers recommend applying a lubricant to the rail of the crossbow and string wax to the string, outside of the area where the serving rides on the rail. Application of the recommended lubricant will increase string life and aid in consistent arrow shot groups. A simple 20-yard open area in the backyard is all that's needed for a practice range. However, it's extremely important to check local ordinances within a municipality regarding the shooting of a bow before setting up a backyard range. Remember, good neighbor relations are strongly advised. It's also recommended that a backstop be used, especially in heavily populated areas. The bag-type targets stuffed with cotton, old clothes, netting, or any substance which will absorb the energy of the arrow are ideal for field point shooting. Bag targets also offer the easiest arrow removal. Any of the 3D animal targets will stop the crossbow arrow as well as they do the longer arrow shot from vertical bows. With cube or 3D targets, it's important to pull the arrow out of the target straight. If the arrow is not pulled out straight, there's the chance of putting a bend in the aluminum shaft. Even a slightly bent arrow will not fly true. Broadhead targets must be made of a very dense foam, capable of stopping the arrow with enough shaft remaining outside the target to permit arrow removal. The other option is to be narrow enough in depth to permit pulling the arrow through the target. 3D animal targets are also good for broadhead practice. They have vital areas outlined, offering real-life practice at making a fatal shot. Check the target manufacturer recommendations before shooting broadheads into a particular target. On the forearm of each crossbow stock, there are grooves for the fingers and thumb. Before cocking, shoulder the crossbow several times, practicing sight alignment, cheek location on the stock, safety on-off movements, and where to put the fingers and thumb on the forearm of the stock. Once the crossbow trigger is pulled, the string moves forward rapidly with a great deal of energy. Having a finger or thumb in the path of this movement is extremely painful. Unlike the vertical bow, a crossbow may be rested and shot. It is recommended to utilize some type of shooting bench when zeroing in. Set the bench 10 yards from the target. Sandbags or other rests for the front end of the bow will aid in quicker arrow grouping. If the bow is to be cocked in the conventional manner, the shooter may want to mark the serving on the string. Use a permanent marker to color the serving immediately outside the rail on both sides. When the bow is cocked, the shooter can quickly look down and see if the string is centered. If not, the string can be quickly adjusted by pulling back on the string and moving the marks to the center of the latch. A sudden shift of arrow groups to one side is a good indicator the bow is being cocked off center. Utilizing a cocking aid, harness, or crank assures center cocking each time. After cocking the bow, engage the safety if it does not do so automatically. Always keep the front end of the crossbow pointed downrange when cocked, even when it doesn't have an arrow loaded. Do not take the safety off or dry fire the crossbow. Shooting without an arrow mounted can damage it and possibly injure the shooter. With a peep sight, the little ball on the pin should be held on the center of the target and in the center of the peep. With a red dot sight system, the red dot should be centered in the tube of the sight and held on the center of the target. With a scope featuring single crosshairs, the center of the target is placed at the intersection of the vertical and horizontal crosshairs. The multiple range crosshair scopes are very popular for crossbows. With this type of scope, the top horizontal crosshair is utilized as the 20-yard crosshair. However the crossbow is sight-equipped, practice sight acquisition several times before actually loading an arrow on the bow. Place an arrow in the crossbow by putting the cock feather down into the track of the bow and moving it back against the string under the arrow retention spring. Keep the crossbow pointed downrange. Make sure there are no obstacles near the ends of the limbs. When the trigger is pulled, the limb tips of the crossbow move forward with enough energy to damage the limbs if they strike a stationary object or cause injury if they strike an observer. Make sure the range is clear before the arrow is loaded. Bring the crossbow to the shoulder. Align the sights on the target. Take a deep breath, let half of it out, release the safety, and squeeze the trigger. Once the latch has released the string, follow through. Keep aiming. It takes time for the arrow to leave the bow. If the shooter relaxes as soon as the trigger releases the latch, the arrow will drop low on the target or not reach it at all. At 10 yards, the arrow should hit the target. Take a second shot. If everything is done the same, the second arrow should strike the target in the same place. Shoot a third arrow. If all three strike the target in the same area, adjust the sight to move the arrow grouping to the top of the center of the bullseye. Shoot another 3-arrow group. If this arrow group is at the top center of the bullseye, move back to 20 yards. At 20 yards, shoot the next 3-arrow group. Then fine-tune the sight to the center of the bullseye. For longer distances, utilizing the PEEP pin sight system, an additional pin may be added for 30 yards or longer and zeroed in by following the same procedure. Manufacturer recommended maximum effective hunting range with a crossbow is 40 yards, and that distance is relative to the habitat where the shot is made. The average successful shot by crossbow hunters is less than 20 yards. If the hunter plans to tree stand hunt, practice sessions should also include shooting from an elevated position. A backyard tree can serve well for this practice. Proper tree stand safety while practicing shooting is very crucial. More hunters are injured or killed by falls from tree stands than any other hunting-related accident. Practice with the tree stand that will be used when hunting. Use a safety restraint each time you climb into the stand. This also helps exercise those areas of the body that are utilized when climbing, strengthening them for the upcoming season. When hunting or practicing from a tree stand, the crossbow should be cocked at the base of the tree and tied onto the tow rope. Once the hunter is in the tree stand and belted in with a safety restraint, the crossbow is pulled up and an arrow is loaded. Once a shot is made from the stand, climb back down to the ground and recock the crossbow. Never lean over in a tree stand to cock the crossbow in the conventional manner. If the shooter is physically capable, he may put the butt of the stock in his chest and pull the string back using both hands. If the shooter is using a crank cocking device, which does not require bending over, the crossbow may be cocked in the stand. When getting out of a tree stand, always remove the arrow from the bow and place it into the quiver. Climb down from the tree. Uncock the bow by loading it with a field-tipped arrow and then firing it into soft ground. This is the recommended way to uncock a crossbow. When practicing from the tree stand, move the 3D target around to identify areas where the shot is there and when the shot is not there. Shoot for the exit, visualizing the path of the arrow through the target at different positions. It's recommended to shoot for the heart. If the deer reacts and drops low, the arrow will still take out both lungs. Another rule for the crossbow hunter to remember is if the animal is excited and nervous, do not take the shot. The reaction of an animal already tense is much quicker than that of an animal that is relaxed. Wait for it to relax or pass on the shot. Practice on the range is a very important key to success in the woods. Comfort and safety should be the two major concerns for the new crossbow hunter compiling a shopping list of needs before venturing afield the first time. A local archery shop, fellow archery hunters, or a local sportsman's group can be helpful in identifying those needs. Because of the limited effective hunting range of the crossbow, 40 yards, and the necessity that the animal hunted is relaxed and in most cases standing still, driving is not recommended. Still hunting or stalking an animal with a crossbow demands the hunter be able to move through the hunted animal's habitat slowly and quietly enough to sneak within 40 yards unobserved. Even more importantly, to get within that range and not be scented by the animal. Most individuals simply do not have the patience to move slowly and carefully enough to become successful stalkers, even with a firearm. Doing so with a crossbow is tremendously more difficult. Never attempt to stalk or still hunt with the crossbow cocked and an arrow loaded on the bow. It is okay to cock the crossbow and carry it that way, but never load an arrow until ready to shoot. Stand hunting from a ground blind or a tree stand is the hunting technique developed by vertical bow hunters and most readily applies to capabilities of the modern hunting crossbow. Ground blinds can be as simple as utilizing fallen branches, weeds, deadfalls, or one of the newer simple pop-up camo-skinned manufactured blinds. Another popular blind is the shanty type, hand-built boxes. A benefit of the pop-up or box-type blind is they help to hold the hunter's scent inside and permit some movement without detection. A benefit of ground blind hunting over tree stand hunting is the angle of the shot is better. At ground level, a broadside shot offers the full lung area for targeting and no exit angle of the area to worry about. The arrow will exit directly opposite of the entry. Tree stand hunting is the most popular form of archery hunting, and it's the most dangerous. Always follow manufacturer's instructions when using a tree stand. The latter type tree stands are the safest. Always wear a fall restraint device when climbing into, out of, and while on the stand. All of this makes the crossbow hunter more efficient, safer, and more physically fit. Practice often. Practice safely. Learn the capabilities and limitations of the crossbow and the arrow it shoots.